Thank you for tuning in to Trail of Family Tales. Mrs. Bettie Hill married Mr. William Hill of Richmond, Virginia. This segment of the series will focus on learning more about the Hill family.
In the 1910s, when Grandma Bettie and Grandpa William got married, they resided in Richmond, Virginia. That became their home. And it's often talked about that Richmond was known as the Harlem of the South. Jackson Ward was a thriving cultural mecca where many entertainers, well-known entertainers came. There were hotels, black-owned businesses, and black-owned establishments. Because remember, during that time, there was still segregation in the United States. So African Americans had to have their own. And so Jackson Ward is well known. Church Hill, that's another area that had black-owned businesses and a thriving community. Magdalena Walker lived in Richmond, and she was well known as a prominent financial leader. John Mitchell Jr., the editor of the Richmond Planet newspaper, also lived in Richmond. These are well-known individuals who are often discussed, and this is what people talk about when you hear the black culture. What's not so readily mentioned, or narratives that I hear often or frequently, are the stories about the Baptist associations and the church associations in general. Magdalena Walker, for her to do what she did with the banking entity, it took the people, everyday people. And so those types of movements required people's legs on the ground who could reach the people in a fast way. Where were the people? In church, especially for areas outside of Richmond. So the more rural areas, that was what you would expect. So that's the work of people like my great-grandfather, Fitcher. He, with the support of others, co-founded a Baptist association in the New Kent, Charles City, and Eastern Henrico areas of Richmond. These are the stories that it's important that we reclaim and don't forget the work of these faith leaders, these lay people who made a huge impact on the culture and on society. And they were the networks of individuals. Many of them were a part of fraternal organizations. Grandpa Fitcher co-founding the Star of East Baptist Association, put on a trajectory, put his sons and his offspring on a trajectory of working in churches, being faith leaders as pastors. And that was very important. Star of East Baptist Association, which covered Eastern Henrico, New Kent County, and Charles City County. He empowered his children. He used his agency to bring hope to the community, to a group of people who had to rely on the intangible to aspire to gain the tangible. And the legacy that he left was one of discipleship. His sons, several of them, went on to pastor churches and do
good in the community, serving others, servitude as leaders. They pastored churches as far as from New Kent County near the James City County line, going towards Williamsburg, Virginia, and as far west as Charlottesville, the Charlottesville area, out in a place outside of Charlottesville called North Garden. They were disciples. That's what Grandpa Fitcher did for his children. He turned them into disciples. So when Grandma Bettie and Grandpa William met, there was one draw. The magnet was Jesus Christ. Their faith was something that they shared in common, and a desire to do better in life. Also, the self-sufficiency. They both believed and they believed in God, and they believed in themselves. And that created determination. That was something that they shared together, and it created a force. Together, their union, there was a force that was combined and formed. So their 4 children could only do greater. I want to acknowledge the hard work of Virginia Commonwealth University, the University of Richmond, the East End Cemetery, the Friends of the East End Cemetery, and many committed citizens who were involved in cleaning up Evergreen Cemetery as well as East End Cemetery. These are 2 of the cemeteries where my ancestors and the Hill family rest now. And these are places in Richmond. When I lived there, I have been there. The state of many Black cemeteries, African American cemeteries, many of them have fallen into ill repair. As a matter of fact, my great-grandfather, William Hill, is buried in Evergreen Cemetery. And my great-great-grandfather, Grandpa Fitcher, and my great-great-grandmother, his wife, Grandma Mary Frances, are in the adjoining cemetery. Our family has a whole plot from my great-great-great-grandfather, Grandpa Nathaniel, who was Grandpa Fitcher's father, to great-great-grandma Mary Frances, and they're still searching. Grandma Mary Frances, from all accounts and what was passed down in narratives to me, she was full-blooded Chickahominy Indian. This record does say that Grandma Mary Frances was the daughter of Robert Faggins and Georgiana James, or Jenkins, who she married and became a Faggins also. But it does mention that they were free before the Civil War. And to me, that further raises more questions of, well, were they really Native Americans? My great uncle, he would tell me, he said, oh, Grandma Mary Frances, she could sit on her hair. She was great at playing the piano. And she was full-blooded Chickahominy Indian. Grandpa Fitcher's history. It says that Grandpa Fitcher's level of schooling is unknown, but some census records indicate he could read and write, as could Mary Frances. All were still living at home on the truck farm the family owned at 2105 Davis Lane. This is the address where my grandfather, my great aunts, Aunt Anna, Aunt Zelma, and Uncle Willie were born. 2105 Davis Lane. Grandpa Fitcher owned a truck farm. It was family owned. And this write-up says that the address no longer exists today, but a 1923 map places it near what is now Glenwood Golf Club right off of Creighton Road. The Hills appear to be the lone African-American family in the immediate vicinity in 1910, although newly developed Woodville, the colored man's paradise, according to an ad in the Richmond Planet, was nearby. The 29th and P Streets, that area, one of Grandpa Fisher's daughters and his son-in-laws owned a dry cleaners in Richmond, so they were definitely contributors to the economy, and hard workers, of course, but they had some very successful investments in community initiatives. Okay, so this church that Grandpa Fisher founded was the Fair Oaks Baptist Church near the end of the line where the streetcar ran, which was at the Fair Oaks station. In addition to these activities, Fisher was also a member of the Seven Pines Lodge number 10183 of the Grand United Order of Odd Fellows. What it says about that organization is it's still an active fraternal society founded in the UK in 1798 and established in the US by African Americans in 1843 when they were denied admission to the whites-only Independent Order of Odd Fellows. Okay, and it does say that my Grandpa Fisher died of stomach cancer at about age 66 on August 29th, 1932, and was buried at East End a few days later in the same plot as his father Nathaniel and possibly his mother Emma. And it says, as of this writing, we have not yet found the headstones of Grandma Emma or for Fisher's brother, William Henry, who is buried at East End as well. His wife, Mary Frances, was laid to rest alongside him 7 years later. Two of their children, Louise and Mary Agnes, are also buried at East End. Several others, including my great-grandfather, William, are interred at neighboring Evergreen. He's at Evergreen, my great-grandfather, and Oakwood. And still others are buried at Mount Lawn Cemetery in Philadelphia, where they had migrated in the 1910s and 20s, joining the flow of African Americans out of the South. Fisher's sister Julia is also buried there, as are at least two of her children. So that was another draw for my great uncle to relocate to Philadelphia. So I've shared the history of the Hill family. I want to talk a little bit now about my great-grandfather, William, and who he was. So my great-granddad, he was driving for Philip Morris or one of the tobacco companies and doing kind of warehouse stuff. And so that's what he made his living doing. I think he was just fine. I do not know why him and Grandma Bettie broke up. That is not something that was discussed, because remember the age of these individuals. Every summer when his mom would come back from New York, his dad would come and see her. So they were still married. I believe that Grandma Bettie, she absolutely loved him. I also believe that he loved her too. And there was never any discussion of any rifts in the family. One story that does resonate with me is Grandpa Fisher, he started these churches and stuff. He was not a preacher, but many of his sons became preachers, Baptist preachers. And so my great-grandfather, Grandpa William, was a twin. He had a twin brother. His brother was Fisher Jr., right? Okay. And so they had the twin names, Fisher, because the Fishers and the William Henrys ran in the family. The Fisher Lees and the William Henrys ran in the family. So Grandpa William was not a preacher, but his twin brother was Uncle Fisher. And so Uncle Fisher, the story tells that Uncle Fisher wore three-piece suits and tailored, and they were sharp looking. Okay, they're city men now, right? And they said, Grandpa William dressed just like him. They dressed alike. So you never could tell who was who. Like, they looked so much alike. I don't know if they were identical, but they looked just alike is the story that it was told. So if you saw one, they said the only way you could tell them they were different was one's face was just slightly slimmer than the others, but they looked exactly alike and they dressed alike. And so you could not tell them apart, but they always wore suits. So that is the story of Grandpa William that I can share of what I know. That's the story of Grandma Bettie that I can share. And I will say, it's the love. It was all about the love.